The Triton method wasn't really designed for commercial growing. And when we start to recreate natural systems like with our lighting, actually taking into account the moon effect, corals start spawning. But if you can keep all this in check with a good method, then you don't have to do so many water changes.
What's up, Reef Builders? Salem Clemens here, back at you with another video. I'm in LA this week doing a crawl through several facilities and stores, and one place I knew I had to see was Unique Corals, ran by Joe Caparata. Jake actually worked here about 10 years ago and began to build Reef Builders very seriously while working at the Unique Corals facility. So there's a lot of history here, and there's always been historic support for Reef Builders. Let's go check out what Joe has to offer today. All right, I'm here with Joe Caparata, the owner of Unique Corals. Joe, why don't you kind of break down what Unique Corals is and what's new here at the store?
Awesome. So we're in the showroom of Unique Corals. Behind us is a farm and a working warehouse, offices, and the Triton layout. So what Unique Corals is basically, it's a farm. We grow corals, we farm corals, we import corals. And we also highlight a lot of the key brands that give the corals the success. They're fortunate enough to form some partnerships and business relationships. And now we're the US distributor for some of the brands that we love to use. In fact, I'm the owner of Marco Rocks, and for many, many years I used Marco Rocks. Now I'm fortunate enough to be the owner. Things like Triton, which is what we use for 11 years now. The Triton method, the chemicals to keep our aquariums happy. The lighting, Ultra X4, and then for flow, Panta Rhei for the flow. So you can see all of that equipment in use here. And also freshwater, maybe like, well, why is there freshwater? That's my passion, that's my love. A lot of saltwater people got started with freshwater, and now being able to kind of come full circle and enjoy freshwater here and showcase some of the nicer freshwater fish, and also use the equipment that we also use on saltwater for a freshwater aquarium makes sense. We also have some freshwater products that could become on the website soon.
Yeah, so Panta Rhei, been kind of a cryptic brand with some really cool stuff. There was some stuff at Wrap California last year. Can you tell us a little bit about the supply chain there and what's coming that's new?
So it's not a big company, but it's a company that makes products in Germany. Everything is made. The cables, the bearings, almost every part of the pump is made by Panta Rhei. It's a division within a larger company that makes motors and cables for things that you use every day. The pumps it's a passion of the Olin Matthias, and we've got on display here and in use the 42, the 63, some of the flagship motors. And then those same motors are now incorporated into what you saw at Reef Palooza, which is the new Panta Surge. Like, come over here, we'll show you this one in action. This is the Panta Surge 42, and it's a elongated box basically, where the water can come in the bottom. The pump is oriented to shoot the water up, and then the water exits through this top piece right here. And you can have complete control over the power, the duration at that power, how long it takes to ramp down, how long it's off between both blasts, and you can also spin the pump reverse. So we have this one on for about 3 to 4 seconds at 100%, and then it immediately goes to reverse at 50%. So it sucks water in the top and shoots it out the bottom. And what that does is it allows the water to kind of go back and forth, just like a real wave on a reef. So we just set this tank up this week, and I didn't want to rush and put corals in, but if there were corals in here, you'd see torch corals kind of go up and down on this design. And this is Marco Rocks. This is our coralline rock. It's a natural rock. A lot of people actually think that it's a fake, well, not think, they assume it's an artificial rock, but it's a natural limestone. And so when you create an aquascape like this that has a surge on the top of it, even without corals, you can kind of start to appreciate how the corals are going to play in that type of flow. So imagining, the water coming up the reef and then down the reef. And what we would do is we would program that hand to surge. Once we look at the flow and how it's hitting a coral, we would start to dial it in.
So in your opinion, having an alternate kind of gyre pattern is what's going to be best, and you think the Panta Rhei equipment can provide that?
I think, yeah, and I think it's not a fault to most designs or what people think they want in terms of flow. When you look at most flow designs now, it's just about how much random flow can I get, how much, water can I move here and there. There's not a lot of thought given to what is the flow like on the reefs and how do I recreate that in my actual aquarium? Like there's a big disconnect. Well, with Panta Rhei, there is no disconnect. There is only one way. That is, everything flows, which is literally what Panta Rhei means. They want the entire tank to flow. And so when you look at the reef and where these corals are collected from, you have tidal flow. You have water coming into the reef, and then you have a slack time, and then you have water leaving the reef. So you have energy in, and then you have a different type of energy, and then you have energy out. But how come the pumps and the way we design our systems now don't really take that into account? At most, you may have a pump that does this, or you may have a pump that does this. That's not recreating natural flow. And when we start to recreate natural systems like with our lighting, actually taking into account the moon effect, corals start spawning. So maybe we need to pay a little more attention to the actual flow in and out of a reef. And that's where the Panta Rhei comes in so well. Creating things like a surge device or a pump that you can ramp up and have complete control on. And when you put multiple pumps on a system, you can spin the gyre both ways. You can reverse it and then forward it. And when we look at some of our other tanks, you'll see this coming more into play.
So would you recommend having two of the Panta Rhei pumps or a surge box on a system?
If you can afford it, these are not cheap pumps. So I want to go short as to recommend them because I'm very sensitive to people's budgetary needs. But yes, if you can use multiple pieces of equipment like that on a system, then you have the ability to really recreate nature. So yes, 2 would be great.
So we're going to take a closer look at many of these systems in some other videos, but looks like they all have got the Lua, the pixels, the vitamin E bars, and the X4s, even an older Blaze unit. Can you kind of talk about the lighting you've got, at least on this reef right here?
Yep. So this one here, we wanted to kind of make the lighting match the dumbed down, simple version of this setup. This setup was actually at my house. This is a wooden stand that I built. I'll show you in it here. No secrets. 2x4, 2x4, custom acrylic sump, no mechanical filtration, just a heater in there and a return puddle. No skimmer, no reactors, just an auto top off connected to RODI water. No doser, no controller, no timer, literally nothing. I set up my first saltwater tank in 1988 and we didn't have any of that stuff. When you wanted lighting, you basically went to Home Depot, bought wood, put aluminum foil in it and put Triton and Philips O3 bulbs and similar. Triton named it completely. Anyway, this system kind of mimics that. There's no filtration over to it. This is a water box tank that I drilled to create a lower water level, so it created more of a lagoon effect in it. But to answer your question, high-tech lighting, but it doesn't use expensive software. There's very basic controls in this. So these lights you can ramp up and down if you buy an inline controller. But this is a very, very good LED cluster, the same ones that are found in the X4s, but isolated, it's called a pixel. And this uses the rail as a heat sink. And a lot of the bells and whistles were stripped out of it to make it non-controllable, but that makes it very affordable. So for about $100, you can get a really high quality LED light. Then you can ramp up and down, but I chose to not even use a control on this. Return the lights on, return the lights off. So they're Vitaminis, pixels, and another Vitamini there.
So you got a couple other tanks in here that are pretty interesting. Like I said, we'll do a deeper dive on them, but maybe show them off here just super quick as a sneak peek. We've got this very interesting scaped lagoon with the deep sand bed and the kind of tilted look like you would see in a lot of freshwater scapes. What inspired you to do this?
So I love trying to do something a little different, but not make that the reason to do it. I wanted to create something of a biotope that mimicked the shallow water, lagoon, mangrove, mud dives of, say, the Solomon Islands or northern Canada where you can get eaten by crocodiles. But anyway, you'd see like this sloping sand bank with mangroves growing and even corals growing off the mangroves. But if you imagine this as a slice of nature, very bright, if you're fortunate enough to have really clear water that day, a lot of times the water is a little turbid in those settings. But this is a good representation of how you'd see, or what you'd see. Soft corals mixed with hard corals, maybe some giant clams like a Gaitis and a Dorasa, a lot of flow that then settles down. But yeah, I mean, I love this top-down view here. You can really appreciate the corals almost growing out of the aquarium.
And then this system has been on Reef filters before. Longtime fans might recognize it. Tell us a little bit about this tank.
Yeah, so this is Reef 301. This is a product from Sam Sobuski of Wetworks. And he was basically hired to build a tank here in LA, kind of with a spare no expense. I mean, just go do top of the line. So it's an Elos tank with 45-degree, dying like miter edges here. MRC built this custom aquarium skate top. It looks like a big Gorgonian. The filtration underneath is like the Space Odyssey, kind of that white look. A lot of custom stuff underneath. And then we had this shell state built by a former employee. He did a fantastic job on it, Tim. He used marker rocks on top of a fiberglass support for it with a kind of a counterbalance over here so it doesn't tip. This probably 200 pounds of marker rock. And the tank was running, he's doing really great. And we were using the Neptune skylights, and then we had a problem on the lights. We decided to change them for a different light. And then we decided to make another change for the lights. We're waiting for the Panta Rhei LEDs. So I'm letting the tank, we pulled the corals out, and we're just leaving the tank, letting it run like this for now, which is fine because it's low maintenance. So it's biologically ready, but we just have the egg coil too. And there'll be a new light coming that I can't wait to show you.
What do you think the timeline on that is?
Hopefully about 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Oh man, so we're gonna have to fly you back out. Oh my God, that might be right after restock. It might be out by the time this video is posted. That's crazy. I hope so. Yeah. All right, so we've seen a little bit of this. Let's go check out the Triton lab now.
Cool. Sounds good. Let's go.
All right, Joe, we're in the Triton US lab. A lot of people might wonder what happens after they send a sample. Can you walk us through the process from mail to their data?
Sure. So the good news is now we do all the testing here in the US. As of 2018, actually, we've been testing here in the US with machines. So basically, just to walk you through it, the mail comes in, and every day, Monday through Friday, we crack these open. And we scan the samples in. As you know, you put a barcode on each of the 3 test tubes. We scan them, that gets entered into the Triton system. You'll get an email that your sample was received here. Then, these are samples that just came today. Then, once they're scanned into the system, Abraham will bring them over and start processing them. So basically there's 3 test tubes. One is going to get reserved just in case there's any quality control issues. The second one is going to get tested through the ICP machine. The third one is going to be tested on a standalone fluoride machine because we can't test for the fluoride ion with ICP OES. All along the process, Isan is overseeing through TeamViewer and coordinating with Abraham. We have very strict quality control measures, so good chunk of samples, not a good chunk, but every day there's a sample or 2 that Isan wants to look at again, and he can call that sample back from a backup. We keep them in Tupperwares for about 3 weeks, and then able to find it, scan it back in, and retest that sample. And if we're still not satisfied with the results, then we'll send the client out a brand new sample kit that they can sample their water again.
So globally, Isan checks every Triton sample.
Yes. So he's running the US lab, the UK lab, Brazil, Germany, Australia, and there's more that's going to come online as well. So he's got all of the screens. It's mission control over there now. It's probably one screen, but we joke around there's multiple screens because he's literally got hands all over the place. So I know a lot of people ask, how long does it take to get the sample? So from the day that we get it, we put it in the machine, we run it that night. Typically, the machine can run from 8 to 12 to even 14 hours, depending on how many samples there are. It takes a lot of processing time. And then once the machine is done, then ESON can come online and look at the samples, look at the data, and upload the results to everyone's unique page. So typically we say 48 hours. Well, most of the time it's between 24 and 48 hours from the time we receive the samples to the time you have an email in your inbox stating that your results are alive reviewing.
If someone sends an NDOC sample, where does that go?
So those are still sent to Europe, and those we're sending out every Friday. Sometimes if we only have a couple of samples, we'll kick it to the next Friday. So at least twice a month, but typically 4 times a month. And that lag time is longer.
So what made you decide to invest in Triton and bring distribution in the lab of the United States? What's the journey like there?
It's actually funny because everything kind of points back to Jake Adams, like a lot of stuff. So in 2014, Jake Adams, co-founder of Reef Builders, invited me on a trip. It was a diving trip to the Komodo Islands. He said a couple of people would be on it, Vincent Challies from Bali Aquarium and ESON from Triton. And I hadn't heard of ESON at the time. It wasn't being sold in the US. Really, nobody was doing ICP testing. So make a long story short, I went on the boat, spent 2 weeks on the water, diving, getting my fill of corals, and at night drinking beer under the stars on a little board, talking reef shop with Jake, Vincent, and ESON and his wife. I was enamored with everything ESON had to say. I fell in love with the Triton method, even though I had never used it. And this method of testing water and adding only what's needed just sounded great. So as soon as I got back to the US, we went to Germany, met with ESON, saw his breathtaking tank, saw the Triton method in action, saw his lab, and it kind of all made sense to me. And he was great enough to give me the opportunity to represent his brand in the USA. So I packed up our suitcase. The suitcase was about 100 samples, the first ICP test ever come in the US. I brought them through customs, and that was a funny experience. And that's how it started. That was 2015. And for the first 2.5 to 3 years, we were gathering the samples and sending them to Europe. And it would take between 7 to 15 days to get those results back. And we knew that we needed to scale this. We needed to close that time frame. The only way to do that is to get a lab here. And
So you got 2 machines here. What's the deal with that?
So this one is undergoing maintenance right now. Right now we're doing all of our testing on the green. This is the blue machine. But yeah, there's two machines. And if we needed a third, we would get a third. So we never want to have an excuse as to why we can't test. In fact, we did have a time, it was last summer, where both machines were out of commission and we were sending samples every day to Europe. Unfortunately, it was adding multiple days to that duration between receiving samples and results. And it was painful for me, painful for our clients. ESON felt horrible, but we did the best we could. So now we want to make sure that we never cannot test here. And it is good that we can rely on the other labs to handle our workload if necessary.
So you got a lot of coral downstairs. How many ICP tests do you do in your own systems a week?
We are testing all of our main systems once a week. And then we mix a concoction of just the trace elements to complement the core 7 that we're dosing. All the marine systems here, probably up top of my head, 10 different systems, and each system is ran on core 7, Triton method. I don't think we're running reef supplements on any of them. And we're dosing traces based on the needs as dictated by the results of the Triton ICP.
What difference have you seen from pre-Triton method to now having the machine in your own place?
So here's the thing. Triton method it's like a bunch of tools. It's a way of reefing by limiting your variables to increasing the odds of success. The less equipment, the less you do, the less your hands are in the tank, the less variables you have that can trip you up. So if you can strip away everything from the aquarium that is not necessary and rely on a natural approach, this giant algae bed filter, which is actually putting pressure on the aquarium to feed it. And in turn, it takes care of the biological needs of the aquarium. It's outcompeting nuisance algae for available nutrients and growing. It's breaking down as phytoremediation happening. There's no true mechanical filter on a Triton method tank. So all that particular waste that you see when you go diving, like marine snow, that's coral food. Bacteria is encompassing or coating that organic matter and the corals are consuming it. Why would we want to take that all out of our aquarium? I think we're chasing a lot of the old demons where we couldn't properly identify or deal with some of these excess nutrients. But now that our lighting is good, our chemistry is stable, our dosing is down pat, the corals are saying, feed me more. So now we're having to add more to the system. So to answer your question, we see a lot more stability and a lot less maintenance, less water changes, less room for error, less relying on RODI filters with our constant water changes or 10% weekly water changes where you're taking out good ions. You're paying good money to dose and to add salt only to take it out and flush it because you want to dilute some of maybe the toxins or some of the built up nutrients. But if you can keep all this in check with a good method, then you don't have to do so many water changes.
So how has doing the Triton method benefited you as a commercial grower?
That's a good question because the Triton method wasn't really designed, I don't think, for commercial growing. It's a holistic approach for a mature and balanced reef ecosystem. That's the opposite of a commercial growing farm. At least the commercial farms that I see where you have a lot of corals going in, a lot of corals going out. Everything is like growing a crave. There's not a lot of live rock. So the method doesn't really mate well with that type of need. However, we modified it and hybridized it to get the benefits of the stability and the reduced variability that comes with the Triton method to create a commercial growing system with a lot of success. And the way we do that is through ICP testing, telling us what each system needs as far as its macro and minor elements, and taking benefits from the Triton method using an algae filter, using a good protein skimmer, using GAC and carbon as needed, dosing things like Core 7 instead of relying on 2R heavy water changers. So we kind of pick and choose from the Triton method to fit the needs of a coral growing farm. But really just the ICP testing at the core is allowing us to maintain really smooth, really consistent water chemistry, and everything else just kind of supports that.
All right, so having lab experience, the biggest thing that changed my mind on water was realizing that there's another way to measure it besides TDS. So we used 17 mega ohm water, which is the lab grade purest water source. I was super excited when you told me about your water system because you do the same.
Yeah.
So you've got super pure water for your coral. Why don't you walk us through your system and then the mixing station you plumbed up?
Right, and to build on that, why would you need that? Well, water is you want to start with the ingredients that you want to add. So you want to start with really pure water, and then from that, add all the ions that your corals need. You don't want to start with impurities, maybe some pesticides, chemicals, other ions. So we start with really clean water. I'm going to walk you through. City water, boom, right in here, this big fat copper pipe. We use a water cup. A lot of people don't use these, but what happens when you have a leak, something explodes? Your water this is at 100 PSI. This water cup is tied to 2 floor sensors. If either one of them touches water, it throws a solenoid and it shuts the water off. That's keef. So now the water goes into a carbon pre-filter, then it goes into multiple stage pre-filter cartridges like a 10 micron and a 5 micron after it's already been hit with carbon. Then it goes into the RO chambers, which are each 4 feet. This is a 2,000 gallon per day unit. And then it's got some polishing filters. Then it goes into our deionization. And here we run a mixed bed DI, a second mixed bed DI, and then a virgin bed DI. And we also use 1 mega ohm lights, and 0 TDS is good water, right? But it's good water, but then you can actually go negative on that. And you could start going negative to 1 mega ohm, 10 mega ohm. That's the ability for the water to transmit an electrical signal. So the less elements that are in the water, the less conductive the water actually is. So as you strip away stuff, the water is less and less conductive. So at 17 mega ohms is like nothing in the water for that electricity to travel through. There's no conductivity happening. So this is stripping out everything out of that water. And if the water ever hits 1 mega ohm, this light goes to red. Then we would swap this with this one. The company that we hire comes and replaces this, and then this is last in line, this is virgin. So this has never been used in the industry before. It's pretty expensive if you ever buy brand new DI bed media, it's filled. Then this is where the resistivity meter grabs the sampling from. And that is connected to this chart, to this meter, which is at 17. And from there, it goes into this 300 gallon mix tank. And we've got this, it's called a witness pipe, and this tells us our water level within here. And there's a high and low sensor that turns your RO on and off.
So 2 really common questions that I see a lot are, first, why OES instead of MS? And second, what's the real difference or benefits to a total carbon analyzer versus the spectrophotometric, the SAC or SAK dissolved organic carbon method? Can you comment on either of those?
Sure. So actually on the machine preferences and MS versus OES, that's something I do want to defer. Actually, both of those questions are better answered by Isan directly, so I don't confuse anything. But the OES performance that we've had and the results that you can see that are evidenced by in our corals and our husbandry methods are second to none. I mean, they're unquestionable. The data driven from this machine resulting in our ability to dose our systems, it's been amazing for 10 years. So MS, great question. I know a lot of people are starting to be aware of it and use it, and that is something Isan loves to answer. So I'm going to defer to him. Actually, he's going to be out here soon, and I'm sure if he asks that question, he will answer.
All right, so we've seen the lab. What else do you have to show me at Unique Corals?
Let's go look at more corals. We'll go take you down, show you the farm tank, the 500, and let's look at more of the showroom tanks too.
All right, sounds good. Lead me there.
Let's do it.
All right, so we got a 500-gallon display tank here, Acropora dominant.
You know, Jake and I have very similar tastes. The really cool, iconic reef building corals